listening to the Terrific Teacherpreneur, a podcast for teachers looking to grow a successful online business. Your host, Alex, was able to transform her Teachers Pay Teachers store from a small side hustle into a profitable full-time business. She now helps other teachers do the same. Listen along for actionable tips and helpful wisdom about business and marketing as a teacherpreneur. Here's your host, Alex.
Hello and welcome to the Terrific Teacherpreneur podcast. I do apologize. I have been a little bit sick recently, so my voice is going to sound a little bit croaky. I hope that's okay, but I still really wanted to record this episode. It's going to be a little bit different, slightly unusual, because it's going to be about more broad kind of marketing things, and then I'm going to talk about how that applies to TPT. But I think sometimes it's interesting to move beyond just TPT advice, like, oh, here's how to make a preview, and to actually look at business and marketing in general and knowledge that people have found, like about human psychology and how things work, and then look at how we can bring that down, applying that to our businesses, because this is something that, experts are finding. This is something that they're teaching in degrees, like really important marketing stuff, and it can apply to us. So I thought I'd share that today. That's basically what this episode is going to be. Either like marketing sort of hack strategies, lots of like techniques and effects and theories that, are really, really common. So let's start off with the first one. So the first one is called the framing effect, and it's about how you present your message and how this influences people's perception. So you're kind of framing your content to influence how your buyers are going to view what you have to offer. And so you're basically kind of like emphasizing the benefits of your product or service rather than its features. And this is something that we have heard before in the TPT world. An example would be, instead of saying, oh, this is my resource, it has 20 pages and within it, there are 10 pages that teach this concept. And then there's also an answer key. And I'm zoning out. It's really quite boring. Talking about the features is not interesting to people, because I do believe that research has shown that people buy with emotion and then they justify their purchase with logic after the fact. They'll go, oh yeah, it was good that I bought that because it has all these features. But at the time, people don't buy because of features. And so you are much actually better off talking about the benefits of how your resource is going to change their life. So crafting a message to sort of stand out and resonate with them and making it sound more appealing. So instead of you saying, oh, it has 20 pages, blah, 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 you're saying, this resource is going to be such a game changer to your classroom. Are you struggling to teach this? Do you find that your students just aren't grasping it and they're really finding this concept really difficult? This is going to make it so much easier for you to teach this. Really getting into how you can make it easier for the teacher or buyer, whoever they are, for the students' engagement and understanding. Maybe saving the teacher lesson planning time or, prep time or whatever, all those kind of benefits that are going to make them think, wow, yeah, this would help me. So we want to be helping them, not boring them. Okay, the next one is called the verbatim effect, which is that people tend to remember the essence of your message rather than the exact wording. So in marketing, this is really expecting you to be as clear as possible. So it's the importance of clarity and being really concise. So you're focusing on the key benefits in your messaging, and that will be more memorable and engaging. So like I mentioned in the last example, an example would be highlighting how your product solves a problem or improves their life. That can leave a really lasting impression. And if you just kind of keep it more short and sweet and to the point, it resonates with them better. So an example would be you write a really lengthy TPT description or a really long email or a really long social media caption, and you're just rambling on and on and on. People kind of zone out and lose interest. But if you're kind of keeping it short and sweet and saying, here is the benefit and how it's going to affect you, and you kind of keep it really simple in terms of wording as well, you're not putting all this fluff and all these extra words in, you're just kind of getting straight to the point, because that is kind of all people are going to remember anyway, and you don't want to lose them while they're trying to cut through all that fluff. So yeah, I think it's an example would be outside of the TPT world. If someone was in the beauty industry, for example, and they were trying to promote a skincare product, they wouldn't want to be talking about all the technical details of all the ingredients in the skincare. As buyers, especially if you're listening and you're a woman like me, you're not going to be interested in what the names of the ingredients are. You just want to know that the skincare is going to make you look radiant and youthful. That's going to be the takeaway that you're going to remember. So you want to focus on what matters most to your audience. in order to get that kind of memorability and that engagement. So it's similar to the last example, really. Yeah, instead of boring them to death with all the extra information about the features of your resource and stuff, you're like honing into the thing that they're actually going to remember. And sometimes that's just like saying, hey, this is going to be a game changer for you in this way. Yeah, very similar to the last example. Okay, the next one is this. It's called the reciprocity effect, like harnessing that reciprocity. So it's kind of like this big principle of marketing that's kind of centered around giving before receiving. So offering value, upfront, and maybe that's free resources or that's free tips and advice. And that really has, I think that helps establish trust. It's helping fostering long-term relationships with your buyers, like that trust factor. Providing like free content also builds up your credibility, your expertise. People think of you as the go-to person in your niche. So for example, maybe you run an Instagram account, like I'm thinking of someone I know that Savannah Campbell, she has like this SOR, Science of Reading account. And it's like each day there'll be some kind of informative post teaching you about science of reading. You come away feeling like you've learned so much from her. So she's providing value in the post she shares. But then of course, I'm assuming as well that she has freebies, lead magnets, freebies in her store, whatever. And all of that is getting people into her funnel and getting them to sort of trust her as the authority and to she's offering that value so that they're sort of thinking, wow, I can trust her. I think as well, it's like, it's more than just building trust. I think it's building this goodwill. And I think the effect is basically that it increases the likelihood that a buyer will reciprocate by engaging with your brand or actually making a purchase. So they kind of feel like, well, you've done something nice for me. This is not something they consciously think like, oh, this person offers tips, I'm going to buy stuff from her. I don't think people really consciously think that, but they think, yeah, you're always doing something good for me. You're always offering something great for me, value and help and support and freebies and stuff. And so I feel almost compelled that I would almost like to reciprocate in some way. And I think I'll buy from you as opposed to some random person I don't know or trust at all. So yeah, really, really interesting. And I'm not going to go too much of a segue into this, but that's why I actually think freebies are really great. And I'm always shocked when I see people in Facebook groups really kind of tarnishing the importance of freebies, kind of talking about how much they hate freebies, because the sort of studies and science have shown there as well, we love freebies. And in another book I read, it talked up the whole chapter, literally talking about like this human psychology of why we like free stuff so much. We just love it. It's indisputable. So, harness that in your marketing and in your business. Okay, the next one is called the clustering technique, which is this really strategic approach to organizing your information. And it's all about kind of improving people's understanding, their comprehension of your information. So you're kind of grouping things together, similar features, similar benefits, whether this is like on your website, a sales page, or TPT description. It's been shown to really drive engagement, kind of make the user experience better as well. Having things in categories, comparing things, it kind of helps people with making an informed decision and just making things as user-friendly as possible. I think that really comes into if you have your own website, you're structuring that in such a way that it's really easy to navigate. And then like your custom categories in your store, grouping things by category to help customers find things really efficiently. If you're writing a blog post, organizing your information really effectively, that helps the user experience. I mean, this one's quite a broad thing, and you might need to take a second to think of an example of how you could actually do this. But yeah, it shows, I think, that people like things to be really well organized. And so I think it's important to take the time to do that. Storefront, when it comes to your categories, descriptions and the way you organize sections of your description and you're writing them on GPT. The way you formulate a caption on social media, or you're writing an email or a blog post or a podcast, whatever, the way you organize it is so important. So, take the time to plan things out and keep that in mind instead of just kind of rambling or rushing in such a way that doesn't, have things organized. The next one is tapping into scarcity. And this is a big one that you probably see outside of TPT, but maybe like in the course world, because of the idea that courses often open and close. So it's a powerful psychological trigger, a very big motivator that taps into a desire that people tend to have for things that they perceive to be maybe limited or really exclusive. So when people say that there's like limited stock of something, or like, a physical product, they're like, it's running out kind of thing. Time sensitive offers, like this is going to be on sale for a limited time. This is going to be discounted or only available for a really short time. Limited edition things as well can create kind of urgency, flash sales, that kind of thing. So, in the way that TPT sale only runs for 2 days and it only comes around every quarter, that makes it much more special than if the entire site was on sale every week for like 2, 3 or 4 days. You know what I'm saying? So when you're doing your own kind of marketing, maybe you're throwing your own store sale, hashtag sale, you're uploading a product that's new and you're discounting it for 24 or 48 hours, or doing another, limited time discount. Or you're offering like a coupon code on your website, or offering something like access to your membership or a freebie, or, I don't know, anything. Or of course, if you're selling a course, it's about having it be available for certain periods, or having it being cheaper for certain periods can make it really enticing. So just something to be mindful of when it comes to people and their psychology is people do like that scarcity. It creates that urgency. So that's something you could factor into your business. Okay, the next one, loss aversion and how to leverage this. So it's a psychological fact. It's like a psychological tactic that capitalizes on our tendency as humans to avoid loss. We hate losing things. So people tend to emphasize this in their marketing, like the potential loss in their marketing message will motivate people to take action on things. So you can like highlight the benefits of your products and stuff as well, but also like the consequence of not doing it, of not taking advantage of this offer really makes people want to purchase. And so that happens a lot of the time. I see like these quotes on social media where people are saying stuff like, it's like a motivational quote that like, you're scared of starting the new business or taking that next step. You're worried about, like scared about doing this new thing. What's the cost of not doing it? Like, what's the danger of not, what's the, like how much money I could lose, or how scared I am to start something. They're like, yeah, but what's the cost of not doing it? And you're like, oh, that's very motivating. But yeah, that is like a thing people talk about in the marketing world. They're like, okay, yeah, you can like totally do this. You could totally put off doing this, but what happens if you don't? Where will we be a year from now if you haven't done this? If you haven't started now, you didn't start today, where will we be a year from now? You will be so behind, you'll be missing out on everything. It creates a little bit of FOMO, I think. People are like, oh my goodness, I don't want to be behind all my peers. I don't want to be missing out. We just don't like losing stuff. So yeah, that helps create that kind of sense of urgency. So for some people that have like memberships or subscription-based things, instead of just talking about the benefit of subscribing, people tend to highlight what that buyer could lose if they don't join the membership. They don't, they miss out on that offer. Hey, you're going to miss out on this exclusive content and all these savings of money and all that kind of stuff. You say like, if you join right now, you've got access to hundreds of resources. If you don't join, you're not going to have all these things. Like it's kind of people going like, oh, I don't want to miss out on all this stuff. So people hate missing out on things. And that segues really well into this next one, which is FOMO. Fear of missing out, a really strong psychological trigger that drives people to do stuff. The scarcity and exclusive offers I mentioned really motivates customers. So when you offer something for a limited time, early bird discounts, that creates a sense of urgency. But people kind of tend to do it. They're like, you've got early access to something. You're kind of a special person if you do it. And like, oh, well, everyone else is doing it. Why are you not doing it? Or like, here are all the people that are doing it. Why are you not doing it? Like FOMO, we've heard of that. We know it's a big thing. And yeah, it really matters in marketing and business. So think about how you could be doing that in your store, whether you have a course or a membership, or whether you're just doing something to do with your products or a discount or a sale or whatever. How can you get your buyers to get that sense of FOMO and feel like they are missing out? It might even just be something you put into your copy when you're writing a TPT description. You're like, this is what's going to happen to you if you don't buy this resource. Like, this is how frustrated you're going to feel. This is what's going to keep being the same for you. Do you really want to miss out on that kind of thing? Okay, next one is called the decoy effect, which is very subtle, but very effective. It's a persuasive technique. And it actually, if you've ever heard the word cognitive bias, but it really influences people's decision making by basically adding in like this dummy third option that makes the existing stuff seem more attractive. So you can influence your buyers by, you introduce this third thing that they've never actually buy, just to make the other two things look good. So like say on your website, you were offering like a membership and you have the price points. You're like, here's the option if you pay month to month. Here's the option if you pay yearly. Like, here's the option if you, and then you like add this third option that's like, here's the option if you pay yearly and then you do this and you add this and you add this. It's like really expensive. People are like, oh, that looks terrible. It makes the other two look better. So that was again in the book I read recently where they had a pricing that was really interesting. So in the book, there was this example of a subscription service where you could subscribe to a magazine. So you could subscribe to an online version for $59, print version, like paper copy, for $125, or you could get the third option, which was this print and online option, and it was $125. So take a second to think about that. You got your $59 one option, $125 for the other option, and then for both together was $125. You might be thinking, wait, what? How does that work? How is the one that's two together, the same price as only one of them? It makes no sense. So yeah, in your brain, you're thinking, oh my God, that middle one is a ripoff. Like the print subscription for 125, nobody's ever going to buy that. Why would you not just buy the print and digital together for 125? And so what that does is it gets people to buy the print and digital together because that middle option sounded so bad and such a ripoff. They're like, ugh. And so they go for the double. And so I think they actually did a study where they like asked people, what would you choose out of these three options? Everyone obviously chose the third one. And then they did the experiment again and they just had like print or digital. And people just chose the cheaper one. They were just like, oh, $59. It was like having the three options and having one look so bad actually made people spend more because they just kind of wanted to get that 2-for-1 deal, that really good one. Like, wow, I could pay 125 and get 2-for-1. That's so cool. And so that is the decoy effect. It's really, really fascinating. And the whole chapter of that book was all about relativity and how everything's so relative. We, have these like anchor prices we look at and we compare them to other things. Like our brains are so fascinating. The book I'm talking about, by the way, is called Predictably Irrational by Dan Ariely. And it's just like this really fascinating book about behavioral economics. And it's so applicable to business because it talked all about these scientific experiments that he did with all these students and, grad students. And he would ask them to do all these different things and you just like see the human psychology playing out. It's fascinating. So I almost kind of wanted to do a podcast episode on that, but I haven't gotten around to it. But yeah, just kind of quoting that because what he's talking about clearly applies to this episode and the things I'm listing. But these effects are just like really common phenomenons. And in the book, yeah, he just happened to obviously explore the decoy effect and he was doing some experiments. Decoy effect, fascinating. And in terms of TPT, it's not like we can really offer like price points within our resources in such a way, but I mean, we do have the bundle option on TPT. So this might be motivation for you to make more bundles. But you know how we can kind of say, hey, you've got product A for $5 and product B for $5. You could buy product A, but you're only getting kind of this much. And if you buy the two together, that costs $10. Like, come get the bundle for $8 because you're saving $2 and you're getting all this really cool stuff. And we're kind of getting people to probably spend more than they actually would just because they feel like they're getting like 2-for-1 and they're saving money than if they bought it the two individually. And I don't know, it's kind of similar, but like there's not really a lot we can do on TPT in terms of the decoy effect. Certainly applicable to pricing if you offer a membership though. But it's just like some really cool thing to think about. And I think it might be something you could figure out a way to apply within your business. How can I offer an kind of decoy choice that's like, that's going to make people like my other choices better? I'm sure you might be able to figure out a way. I'm trying to, off the top of my head, I can't think of something that would be like really super applicable to TPT products. But, in terms of the types of products you're offering, different versions and things, like, hey, you've got the print or the digital version of this resource. And then you've got the print and the digital. Like that might be an example, especially during COVID when everyone was making digital versions. If you can offer a resource that has two versions together, or you're like, we got the English or the Spanish, but this one has English and Spanish together. I mean, I don't know. Maybe there's a way to kind of decoy in that sense. Anyway, okay. The next one is the frequency illusion. So it's how we notice things more once we're aware of them. So this is kind of really helping you with increasing your brand exposure with repeated messaging. So retargeting ads when it comes to Facebook and stuff, email campaigns. You basically want to become as frequent as possible almost. We tend to notice things more once we're aware of them. And so like we could retarget your website visitors. I mean, that's another example. Follow-up emails, I guess, a more specific example. Keeping yourself really top of mind. That's kind of why they say that it takes us 7 times before someone finally actually like purchases or takes in a message. So you sometimes have to talk about something 7 times before it really sinks in. But yeah, don't feel like shy about repurposing and repeating yourself because you tend to actually have to be frequently talking about something in order for people to actually take it in. And then they'll actually start to notice it once they made them aware of it before, basically. You're like, hey, I talk about this thing all the time. And then like effortlessly they'll do it. I can think of all the things I've ever invested in my business. I mean, I can't think of an example of where someone just said, hey, this is cool, you should buy it. And then I went and bought it, like really very rarely. Most of the time I've heard about that product so many times beforehand. And then when finally someone says, hey, this is really cool, you should get it. I'm like, I'm already convinced because I've heard 5 other people swear that it's awesome. Or I've seen ads for it a bunch of times. Like we tend to have to see something quite a few times. And then like, the final time will be like, someone will say something or we'll see an ad and we're like, yeah, I'll purchase it. I mean, I know I'm like that too. Even in the day to day, I'm sure my dentist has always been saying to me, you should use a water flosser. And I was like, eh. And then I had a friend say that they used a water flosser. I heard them say it. And then my sister was saying, I'm using a water flosser. Like I heard it a few times and then suddenly here I am water flossing, which by the way is really good for you. I think I had to hear it a bunch of times before I was ready. And Dale, my husband Dale, is always having a go at me. He's always saying, how come you never listen to me, but you listen to your mum and your sister and when other people say stuff? It's usually that he tells me something the first time, it just goes through one ear and comes out the other. But once I've heard it repeated by other people, I'm suddenly like, okay, I'm willing to listen because now it's piling up the evidence. Multiple people are saying this thing. So yeah, I guess that's kind of like a real world example. But I know just for a fact, whether I'm buying things like for my daughter or, shopping online, like being influenced by things on social media or buying things for my business, whenever it comes to buying stuff, I feel like I do have to see that frequency in order to want to purchase. And this is going to segue very well to the next one. They're actually very connected. It's called the mere exposure theory and explains how repeated exposure to something increases familiarity and preference. So it builds like brand recognition and loyalty over time. So you're regularly sending out social media posts, you're regularly writing email newsletters, you're basically top of mind all the time to the point where they hear about you so much, people start to like you more. So you're kind of exposing your target audience to you through various different channels. Like 1 minute you're on TikTok and also you're on Instagram and also you're emailing them and also you're creating products and they follow you on TBT. You regularly doing that over and over and over again begins to resonate with them. It builds a familiarity and a trust over time. So like on the know-like trust factor, that brand loyalty is created and that's what creates long-term success in your business. Basically, people have been merely exposed to you so many times, they eventually, I think, have to buy from you and trust you and like you and want to know who you are. It's just like basically, yeah, the exposure of your business plenty of times. I'll wrap this up now because the 20 minutes of talking has really grated on my poor sickly voice, but I was really excited to record this episode. I thought it'd be fun to talk about like the marketing psychology that people talk about in the marketing world in general, and then kind of remind you that this stuff is actually all applicable to TPT because guess what? Your buyers are just human beings, just like everyone else. They may be teachers, or, maybe shopping on Teachers Pay Teachers, but that doesn't mean that they're not just like the average consumer. And all of these phenomenons and effects and stuff do apply to them. And so I gave you a few examples when I could, but I'll be honest, like I said, I'm sick. This has been a little bit rushed. You might take a second to think about some of the things I shared and how you could actually apply that to your business. That's my action item for you. Have a little think about how any of these effects could be applicable to your business and how you could really capitalize on that. Some of the takeaways might just be that, you continue to repeat your marketing content in order for that kind of exposure and familiarity that I talked about in the last few points. But, there was a lot of really great stuff on there. So yeah, definitely, I'm not going to repeat them all again because I'll end up making this podcast really long, but maybe re-listen to this at another time if you think you want to take some notes or something. There's been some really cool stuff in here, and you can also give a Google if you want to learn more about these marketing tricks. So you could Google the names of the ones I've shared and then look at some more examples of how they work. A lot of the time it will be not applicable to TPT. It'll say stuff like, oh, you're in the fitness industry. Instead of talking about the muscles and stuff, talk about how you can make them, they're healthier and their lives so much better because they'll be able to play with their children more. You know what I mean? Like it will give you examples outside of TPT in all these other industries like beauty, fitness, whatever. But, you can just think about how can I apply that to TPT? It's usually possible. Like I mentioned earlier, I did read the book Predictably, Irrational, and that's definitely something I highly recommend. It obviously applies to business, but it's also more of like a fun, interesting read if you just kind of find that kind of stuff really interesting. He talks about the relativity I mentioned, like how everything is relative. So what you perceive as good value or really great is usually relative to other pieces of information you've received before. The fallacy of supply and demand and like how you can kind of ramp things up to make them look better. There was just some really interesting things about freebies. Like he talks about the cost of zero cost and how often we actually buy into things that are free at cost to us. Like it's not actually always beneficial. An example, like people like lining up in a big long line to get like some free ice cream. It's like you just wasted an hour of your time. Like what cost was that to you? We're so motivated by free stuff. We often pay too much when we pay for nothing. I think the example was really interesting that he gave. He said, so this is really interesting. He said, a quick quiz. Suppose I offer you a choice between a free $10 Amazon gift certificate and a $20 gift certificate for $7. Think quickly, which would you take? Most people jump for the free option. So they asked and they basically said, which one would you choose? But if you have a look again, the $20 gift certificate that you actually have to pay for $7 delivers a $13 profit. That's actually better than getting the $10 certificate for free. And so it's that kind of irrational behavior of how we don't care what the actual value of it is. We like the word free. It's just really, really interesting. It makes me think about how many times I've been duped by things just because it's free and not necessarily good. Talks about like procrastination, self-control, and really fascinating there. He gave an example of I know I said I wasn't going to ramble on, but this book is so interesting and I don't think I have time to do a whole episode on it, but he did like a study on these grad students and he said, in this 12-week semester, you have the option to he basically created like 3 groups and he sort of said, you have to submit your 3 assignments a week 4, 8, and 12. The next group, he said, you get to choose when you want to submit these assignments throughout the semester. They do obviously all need to be in by week 12, but you get to set your own deadlines. And then the third group, he said, there's no deadlines, just have all 3 assignments to me by week 12. You want to have a guess which group of students performed best on those assignments. It was the first group, the ones that were given the 4, 8, and 12 week deadlines. They were really kind of spaced out and they all performed really well. And the other groups all just rushed their 3 assignments at the last minute and did really terribly on them. And it shows how our human tendency when we're given those options is just to procrastinate. And we really don't thrive on that. And I know for a fact there's so many people that have like joined some of my courses and they just like never started it, never finished it. Because there's, it's lifetime access, it's self-paced, you've got all that openness and that freedom. They don't have the, ability to like set deadlines and the content doesn't disappear or anything. So they're like, oh, I'll just get to it. And they never do. It's really heartbreaking. But that's what we do all the time is we procrastinate. We don't have that self-control. And so it's so important to have deadlines. I mean, reading that chapter alone was like, wow, eye-opening. He also talks about the high price of ownership and how much we overvalue things that we have. We're like, just because we've bought something, we have something, we think it's worth more than it is. It isn't. And why he also goes on to talk about why options distract us, like having too many choices can be overwhelming and that decision fatigue. So if you're offering something in your business and you're offering too many options, people will be overwhelmed. You have to keep things really, really simple. He talks about the effect of expectations. So, how the mind gets what it expects and how when we like read a good review about a movie, we tend to actually enjoy that movie more. When we hear someone say that something is good, we will actually enjoy it more. If someone says something's bad, like we read a bad review, then we tend to not enjoy it as much. I think that's also why I enjoy movies more once I've read the books, things like that too. But yeah, we can actually create these expectations in our mind. It's not actually what we perceive. It's, we could physically be tasting something. And if someone tells us it's got vinegar in it, we're like, oh, it tastes gross. But if they don't tell you that, you think it tastes nice. He did an experiment. It was really interesting. He gave all these students these beers and like they had vinegar in them. And when they told them it had vinegar, they said it was disgusting. And when they didn't tell them, they thought the beers tasted really nice. Like, so interesting. And then he also goes on to talk about the power of pricing. Can a 50-cent aspirin do what a penny aspirin can't? And he talks about like how literally we put value on things that cost more, how we buy designer clothes and, we're willing to pay more for things that we think are perceived to be, better. And a lot of the time it's the placebo effect. He talks in depth about the placebo effect and how we are really naive in the way we, kind of get into our mind that something is good or bad and it's like 100% a placebo. I don't know. You just have to read it. So, so interesting. That's my little kind of summary just to kind of motivate you maybe to read the book. It's just, there's some really interesting stuff in there. And there's a few things I definitely think could apply to TPT in our businesses. And one of the things that just comes to mind is like, having freebies, such a valuable part of your business. Don't listen to that person in the Facebook group that says freebies are terrible. The science behind it shows that they are valuable. So that's an example. But another one is when people think that by pricing their TPT resources really low, that they'll make more sales. If I drop it down to $1, maybe someone will buy it. Like, it doesn't work like that. People have that perception of value when it comes to pricing. They think, that it's better value because it's priced higher. Well, it's $10. It must be really good. If that's only $1, that's probably really terrible. So these are the sort of things you want to learn and understand about because they have a massive impact on your bottom line. And you could be missing out on a lot of revenue in your store because you're pricing things terribly, because you are thinking that if you undervalue yourself, that'll make more money. And the opposite happens. It actually repels people. So fascinating. Like I said, I wish I'd done an episode on it. I don't know if I really have time, but if you want to read the book, it's definitely really interesting. And if not, I've rambled on enough that hopefully you got a few good things out of it. Wow, we're at half an hour. I haven't done this long an episode in such a long time. I really hope you enjoyed this though. I hope it's some food for thought, some fascinating things to think about. Definitely worth applying to your business. Just like take a second to like maybe re-listen to this, take some notes or read the book or Google some of these marketing techniques. I think it will be a game changer for you. As usual, I will put a link in the show notes to my Instagram account at Terrific Selling Tactics. I do share lots of reels and stories, and I often share things like this. So for example, I'll be reading that book in real time, and then I'd be like, oh, this is a really cool thing I learned from the book. Like at the moment, I'm reading a really cool book called The One Thing. So I've been posting about that on stories. Like I'll say, hey, this book's really good. I recommend it. Here are the cool things you learn about business. So you could kind of learn these things before I ever record a podcast about it. Or like in the case of this book today, like I'm not actually going to really record a full podcast on it. So you're missing out. So yeah, I do talk about these kind of interesting things on Instagram. So you could learn a few things in a kind of bite-sized way if you want to learn some of these exciting things. But yeah, I do read some great books and I do learn a lot of things, and I often share it on there. So definitely check it out. I hope that you have a terrific day.
Thank you for listening to this episode of The Terrific Teacherpreneur. If you're enjoying the show, please feel free to rate, subscribe, and review on your preferred podcast listening platform. We really appreciate that effort. Come back for more actionable tips and helpful wisdom in the next episode with your host, Alex. Until then.